The rain slammed against the window of the Brooklyn coffee shop, each drop a tiny drumbeat in Ethan Caldwell's chest. He was 25, wiry, with chestnut curls that clung to his forehead as he stared at his best friend, Marcus Rivera, laughing across the table. Marcus, 26, broad-shouldered with a jawline that could cut glass, was oblivious to the way Ethan's heart fractured every time he grinned. Ethan had loved Marcus for 3 years. 3 years of late-night talks, shared playlists, and stolen glances that Marcus never returned. They'd met at a queer art collective in Williamsburg, bonding over bad poetry and cheap wine. Ethan, a graphic designer with a penchant for overthinking, had fallen hard for Marcus's easy charm, his Puerto Rican heritage woven into his every word, his every laugh. But Marcus, a budding music producer, saw Ethan as a brother, nothing more. "You're my rock, man," he'd say, clapping Ethan's shoulder, each word a dagger. Tonight, Ethan's patience snapped. Marcus was ranting about his latest fling, some DJ named Leo who just got him. Ethan's coffee grew cold as he listened, his fingers tightening around the mug. "You ever think about settling down?" Ethan asked, voice low, hoping for a crack in Marcus's armor. Marcus shrugged, eyes on his phone. "Nah, I'm good. Love's too messy." Ethan's chest ached. He was done being invisible. Out of spite, Ethan did something reckless. He'd been dodging texts from Julian Torres, a 27-year-old barista with a sly smile who'd flirted with him at a Greenpoint cafe. Julian was all sharp cheekbones and confidence, the opposite of Marcus's warm chaos. Ethan texted Julian that night, "Want to grab drinks?" By the next week, they were dating. Ethan didn't love Julian, but he loved the idea of Marcus noticing him, finally. Their first date was at a dimly lit speakeasy in Bushwick. Julian, in a leather jacket, leaned close, his hand grazing Ethan's knee. "You're hard to read, Ethan," Julian said, smirking, "but I like a challenge." Ethan forced a smile, but his mind was on Marcus, who'd texted him earlier. "Yo, you're dating now?" Wild. No jealousy, just surprise. Ethan wanted to scream. Weeks passed, and Ethan played the part, posting selfies with Julian, laughing at his jokes, letting Marcus see him move on. They still hung out, but now Marcus's glances lingered. One night, at a rooftop party in Dumbo, Marcus pulled Ethan aside, his dark eyes searching. "You're different lately," he said, voice tight. "Julian's changing you." Ethan's pulse raced. Was Marcus jealous? "Maybe I'm just done waiting." Ethan shot back, heart pounding. The tension built like a storm. Ethan and Julian's relationship was a performance, but Marcus's sudden attention felt real. At a queer poetry slam in Harlem, Marcus watched Ethan from across the room, his usual grin replaced by something raw, unguarded. Ethan read a poem about unrequited love, his voice trembling, eyes locked on Marcus. The crowd applauded, but Marcus just stared, his jaw tight. Julian noticed. "You're still hung up on him, aren't you?" he asked later, outside the venue. Ethan couldn't lie. Julian sighed, not angry but resigned. "Figure it out, Ethan. I'm not here to be your rebound." Guilt twisted Ethan's gut. Julian deserved better, but Ethan's heart was a traitor, tethered to Marcus. The breaking point came at a music festival in the Catskills. Ethan and Marcus shared a tent, the air thick with unspoken words. As fireflies danced outside, Marcus turned to Ethan, his voice barely a whisper. "I didn't know I could lose you," he said. Ethan froze, his heart a wildfire. "You never saw me," he replied, voice cracking. Marcus reached for his hand, and for the first time, Ethan felt seen. But love isn't that simple. Ethan had hurt Julian, and Marcus's sudden feelings felt like a reaction, not a revelation. Could Ethan trust this shift, or was it just another game of spite? As the festival's music pulsed in the distance, Ethan faced a choice. chase the love he'd always wanted, or walk away from the chaos he'd created. The Catskills night was alive with the hum of guitars and distant laughter, but inside the tent, Ethan's world was collapsing. Marcus's hand lingered on his, warm and steady, but Ethan's mind churned. Was this real? Or was Marcus only reacting to Ethan's new life with Julian, a spark born of jealousy rather than love? Ethan pulled his hand away, the air between them heavy. "Why now, Marcus?" he asked, his voice sharp with years of pent-up pain. Marcus's eyes, usually so confident, flickered with uncertainty. "I don't know," he admitted, running a hand through his dark hair. "Seeing you with Julian, it messed me up. I didn't realize what you meant to me until you weren't just mine anymore." Ethan's heart lurched, but doubt anchored him. "I've been here, Marcus, for years, and you never looked at me like that." The words stung, raw and honest. Marcus flinched, his broad shoulders slumping. "I was scared," he said softly. "You're my best friend. What if I screwed it up?" The confession hit Ethan like a wave, but it didn't erase the hurt. He thought of Julian, who'd been kind, patient, and undeserving of being a pawn in Ethan's desperate bid for Marcus's attention. "I need time," Ethan said, standing abruptly. He unzipped the tent and stepped into the cool night, leaving Marcus in the dim glow of their lantern. The festival blurred around him, neon lights, pulsing beats, and strangers dancing under the stars. Ethan wandered to a quiet hill overlooking the stage, his chest tight. He'd spent years pining for Marcus, but now that Marcus was reaching back, it felt like a betrayal of his own heart. Had he pushed himself into Julian's arms out of spite, or was there something real there too? The next morning, Ethan avoided Marcus, sticking close to the festival's art stalls. He texted Julian, an apology spilling out. "I'm sorry. I wasn't fair to you." Julian's reply was quick, gentle. "I knew you weren't all in. Just be honest with yourself, okay?" Ethan stared at the words, guilt mingling with relief. Julian was letting him go, but the freedom felt heavy. Marcus found him by a food truck, his expression softer than Ethan had ever seen. "Can we talk?" Marcus asked, holding 2 iced coffees. Ethan nodded, and they sat on a grassy slope, the festival buzzing below. Marcus took a deep breath. "I've been an idiot," he said. "I kept you close but never let you in. I was scared of what it'd mean if I admitted I felt something more." Ethan's throat tightened. "What do you feel, Marcus?" he asked, barely above a whisper. Marcus looked at him, his brown eyes raw. "I love you," he said. "Not just as my best friend. I think I always have, but I was too dumb to see it." The words were everything Ethan had dreamed of, but they came with thorns. Could he trust Marcus's heart, or was this just fear of losing him to someone else? Ethan didn't answer, letting the silence stretch. Marcus didn't push, just sat beside him, their shoulders brushing as the sun dipped low. Back in Brooklyn, Ethan threw himself into work, sketching logos for a new client. Marcus gave him space, but his texts were constant, small, thoughtful messages, like links to songs they'd loved or photos of their old haunts. Each one chipped away at Ethan's walls, but he couldn't shake the fear that Marcus's feelings were fleeting. One night, at a queer open mic in the East Village, Ethan saw Marcus perform for the first time in months. Marcus's song was raw, a ballad about regret and second chances, his voice breaking on the chorus. Ethan's eyes burned with tears. The lyrics weren't just words, they were for him. After the set, Marcus found him in the crowd. "I meant every word," he said, voice steady despite the nerves in his eyes. Ethan wanted to believe him, but the weight of his own choices held him back. He'd hurt Julian, used him to spark Marcus's attention. What kind of person did that make him? As Marcus stood there, waiting, Ethan realized love wasn't just about desire. It was about trust, accountability, and facing the mess they'd both made. The East Village was alive with neon signs and late-night chatter, but Ethan felt like he was drowning. Marcus stood inches away, his breath visible in the chilly October air, waiting for Ethan to say something, anything, after the song that had laid his heart bare. Ethan's chest ached with the weight of it all, love, guilt, and the fear of ruining something he'd cherished for years. "I need to figure myself out," Ethan finally said, his voice cracking. Marcus nodded, his face a mix of hope and hurt. "I'll wait," he said softly, then turned and disappeared into the crowd. Ethan stood frozen, the city pulsing around him. He'd wanted Marcus for so long, but now that the possibility was real, it terrified him. The next week was a blur. Ethan threw himself into his art, sketching late into the night, trying to untangle his feelings. He missed Julian's easy laugh, but it was Marcus's voice, his song, his confession, that haunted him. He met his friend Aisha, a 24-year-old photographer with a sharp wit, at a diner in Bed-Stuy. Over greasy fries, he spilled everything. "You're scared because it's real now," Aisha said, her braids swinging as she leaned forward. "You spent years loving Marcus from a distance. Now he's stepping up, and you're freaking out because it might not be perfect." Ethan stared at his plate, her words cutting deep. She was right. He'd built Marcus into a fantasy, but real love was messy, uncertain. Ethan started small, texting Marcus to meet for coffee. They chose a quiet cafe in Park Slope, far from their usual haunts. Marcus looked nervous, his usual swagger softened. "I'm trying to be better," he said, stirring his latte. "I know I hurt you by not seeing you sooner." Ethan's heart twisted. For the first time, Marcus wasn't just charming, he was vulnerable. They talked for hours, peeling back layers of their friendship. Marcus admitted he'd buried his feelings, afraid of losing Ethan altogether. Ethan confessed his spiteful choice to date Julian, the guilt still heavy. "I used him to get to you," Ethan said, voice low. "I hate that I did that." Marcus reached across the table, his hand steady. "We both messed up," he said. "But we're here now." The weeks that followed were tentative, like stepping onto thin ice. They hung out as friends, but the air crackled with something new. At a drag show in Bushwick, Marcus grabbed Ethan's hand during a performance, his grip tight and unapologetic. Ethan's pulse raced, but he didn't pull away. For the first time, he let himself feel the possibility of more. But doubt lingered. Ethan ran into Julian at a bookstore in Williamsburg, his heart sinking as Julian smiled, no trace of bitterness. "You look happier," Julian said, his eyes kind. "I hope he's worth it." Ethan mumbled a thank you, guilt flaring anew. Julian had been collateral damage in his desperation, and Ethan vowed to never hurt someone like that again. One night, Marcus invited Ethan to his tiny studio in Crown Heights, where he'd been working on new music. The room was cluttered with vinyl records and fairy lights, a space that felt like Marcus's soul. He played Ethan a demo, a soft melody about finding home in someone else. "It's for you," Marcus said, his voice barely audible. Ethan's eyes welled up. This wasn't jealousy or spite. This was Marcus choosing him. As the song ended, Ethan stepped closer, their faces inches apart. "I'm scared," he whispered. Marcus's hand found his cheek, warm and steady. "Me too," he said. "But I'd rather be scared with you than lose you again." Ethan's resolve cracked, and he leaned in, their lips meeting in a kiss that felt like coming home. But love doesn't erase the past. Ethan knew they had work to do, trust to build, wounds to heal. As they pulled apart, foreheads resting together, Ethan felt the weight of their journey. This wasn't a fairy tale, but it was theirs, raw and real. The kiss lingered in Ethan's memory as he walked through Prospect Park, the November leaves crunching under his boots. Marcus was beside him, their hands brushing but not quite holding, a quiet promise in the space between them. They were trying, but love, Ethan realized, was less about grand gestures and more about the small, brave choices they made every day. The weeks after their kiss were a delicate dance. They went on real dates. Dinner at a hole-in-the-wall taco joint in Sunset Park, stargazing on a rooftop in Red Hook. Each moment felt like a gift, but Ethan couldn't shake the fear that Marcus's feelings were a fluke, a reaction to losing him to Julian. He voiced this one night, sitting on Marcus's couch, a half-empty pizza box between them. "Do you only want me because I was with someone else?" Ethan asked, his voice raw. Marcus's face fell, but he didn't look away. "I noticed you because you were with Julian," he admitted. "But I love you because you're you, because you've been there through my worst days, because you make me want to be better." Ethan's throat tightened, the honesty disarming him. They worked to rebuild trust. Marcus opened up about his fear of commitment, rooted in watching his parents' messy divorce. Ethan shared his struggle with self-worth, how he'd let unrequited love define him for too long. They argued sometimes, about Marcus's tendency to charm his way out of tough talks, about Ethan's habit of overthinking every gesture. But they listened, apologized, and kept showing up. One evening, at a queer community fundraiser in Flatbush, Ethan saw Julian across the room. His heart sank, but Julian approached, his smile warm. "You two look good together," he said, nodding toward Marcus, who was laughing with friends. Ethan apologized again, but Julian waved it off. "You taught me I deserve someone who's all in," he said. "Go be that for him." Ethan nodded, gratitude and resolve settling in his chest. As winter settled over New York, Ethan and Marcus grew closer, their friendship evolving into something deeper. They spent Christmas Eve in Marcus's studio, stringing fairy lights and dancing to old jazz records. Marcus pulled Ethan close, his breath warm against Ethan's ear. "I'm all in," he whispered. Ethan smiled, believing him, not because it was perfect, but because it was real. Months later, they stood on that same Catskills hillside from the festival, now blanketed in snow. Marcus carved their initials into a wooden bench, a quiet promise. Ethan traced the letters, his heart full. They'd hurt each other, hurt others, but they'd chosen to grow, to face the mess and build something honest. Their story wasn't a fairy tale ending. It was a beginning. Love, Ethan learned, wasn't about being seen. It was about seeing each other, flaws and all, and choosing to stay. As they stood together, the city lights twinkling below, Ethan knew they'd keep choosing each other, one brave step at a time.